All right, so even though it's kind of good because Dan and I didn't really, I gave him the big picture of what I wanted him to talk about, and actually we used a couple of the same resources, which is kind of neat. So it makes me think that I did my due diligence as well. But so we're talking about the Drupal perspective for PCI compliance, and that article about the 10 myths. One of the sources I used referenced that, and so I read that article too. So and then we'll talk about some implications and do sources and try to answer some questions here. So first of all, huge disclaimer. In addition to not taking baths with a hair dryer, so I'm not a PCI compliance expert, and you'll see that but nothing I say in this presentation comes from me anyway. You know, I have a lot of references for pretty much everything, and there are two big ones, and I have links to those at the end. But you know, these are some, I guess, best practices for most everyone in this room. And so, first of all, the top 10 myths. Drupal on its own is not PCI compliant. Neither is Joomla or WordPress or anything. On its own, it's not. No single vendor.
It's a myth.
That's a myth.
Oh!
This is a myth.
It took me a second.
Drupal is PCI compliant. This is a myth. Yes.
The word
So the opposite of the myth is the fact that Drupal on its own. The word you want to shift towards is PCI compatible. Drupal is PCI compatible. You can run a PCI compliant Drupal site. Okay. You can also not run a Drupal. Yes.
Clever.
So another myth. UberCart and Drupal Commerce are PCI compliant. This is also a similar thing. They are compatible with PCI compliance. It doesn't mean that just because you use these things, you are, hey, I'm using this, so I'm compliant. That is not true. So just because you have HTTPS, that doesn't mean that your website is necessarily secure. So HTTPS is good, but it's only one part of compliance. I can store credit card numbers. That's one of Dan talked about a lot, including the CCV. It's never allowed to be stored at all. And actually, there's no need to store them at any point. So the next thing is this shared management method where if your credit card never touches your server, it's 100% foolproof. That is false. Someone can, in theory, if you have an insecure website, someone can change that redirect. So instead of redirecting to PayPal, guess what? You might redirect to PayPal, who's running PayPal, who's in some basement somewhere, and then so you can have HTTPS, you can have Drupal.
Redirected to pay Peter.
Yes. So the point is, you can, someone can get into your Drupal application layer. They can do a man-in-the-middle attack and do bad things.
SAQAEP.
Well,
basically, both A and AEP have the same fundamental problem. Is that?
Yeah.
But basically, what the credit card companies are saying is that with A, the number of hacks that actually execute a man-in-the-middle, they're usually caught really quickly. So the number of actual cards that are actually compromised is low.
Okay.
So yes, there's a risk of that, but that is usually a handful, a dozen credit cards are compromised. Whereas hosting your payment information, even if it doesn't go through your server, if your server is hacked and then somebody actually passively is passing that off, there's no way for the credit card companies to know that that's happening. Whereas, like PayPal has a tremendous army of developers trying to keep that secure, and system administrators and processing around that. And that's why the credit card companies are more comfortable with the redirect path.
Mm-hmm.
But that it is not in insanity. I mean, it can still be hacked.
I can achieve PCI compliance using shared hosting. first of all, it's really hard to actually run a decent Drupal website, period, on shared hosting. But anyway, so this is the PCI Compliance white paper for Drupal that says that basically they do not recommend it, even though technically you can have an iframe or this redirect, redirect to PayPal. It's not recommended because, I mean, literally, you can't lock down that system. It's a shared host. So it's technically allowed, it's not recommended. Cloud hosting. So I could, just by using a cloud host, I am PCI compliant. Guess what? You're not. You're not. Fail. Just because. You are, again, you might be PCI compatible, but the only two I found, granted I didn't do a huge amount of research, but two that I did find, and they actually are the two very popular ones for Drupal, Acquia Cloud Enterprise and Pantheon, both address, and those are links directly. That doesn't just go to pantheon.com, that links to their documentation on PCI compliance. So, but if you are on a cloud host, if your site is hosted on in the cloud, you should definitely talk to somebody and ask them.
If you're going more kind of full bolts, AWS EC2 is fully PCI compliant. They have a page that kind of enumerates what services are PCI compliant, but you don't have to dedicate a host with AWS to be PCI compliant, whereas to be HIPAA compliant, you do have to then host. You can't be on a box with potentially another. You can't be on a host with other people. It has to be all your stuff.
Nice. Okay. I can just set it and forget it, like that good old. What was it? Set it and forget it. I didn't have time to get all the images I wanted to. But basically, if you never update, you do a security update for Drupal, and you're doing e-commerce, you lose. You cease to become compliant if Drupal's part of your PCI compliance solution. So it doesn't apply to me. Well, guess what? If you accept one, that level 4, it's up to, I forget how many transactions, 20,000. But guess what? It starts at your first transaction. So if you accept a single credit card payment, I'll only sell 10 t-shirts, no big deal. Well, guess what? You're in scope so whether you like it or not. Oh, and I'll reference, so this reference is, this is the guy who did the screencast about demystifying PCI DSS 3.0. Greg Rosenberg, he's one of those professionals. He does this all the time. So he led this, and it was sponsored by Commerce Guys. So I'll reference, when you see Greg's name, that's him. And he's on LinkedIn. He's a real person. So top 10, number 10. I don't have to worry because my site is small. My site is small. Sorry, I left a verb out of that sentence. But guess what? The only breaches we hear about in the news are the big ones. Target, Home Depot, the list continues. But guess what? Most of the breaches, according to Greg, are actually smaller retailers. But small retailers just don't make the news. So there you go. And our list goes up to 11 because we rock. I hate Drupal Rockstar references. I don't know why I just said that. But I added this one. So if I use an iframe or redirect to process cards, I don't have to worry about compliance. That is not true. You still must be compliant.
SAQA.
Yes, that just changes what SAQ you are compliant under. So that's the, like Dan said, that's the major difference. You used to not, but now you are. So this is, Dan definitely alluded to this, of course. The Drupal PCI Compliance white paper put some numbers to this. I don't know where they got these numbers for sure, but it kind of makes sense if you think about developer hours and what you bill. There are 14 controls or standards, I guess, specific ones that you have to say that you meet that will only take So if you're billing, let's just make the math simple, $100 an hour, you know, a few hours, 10 hours max. But then you can see how it starts to add up
Exponentially there.
exponentially. I don't know where, yeah, like, so,
$1 million.
yeah, so it includes these they include these audits here, but yeah, so A is kind of the way to go if, from an hours perspective. However, there's a lot of factors, including, your brand. If you do a redirect to PayPal or to Shopify or another solution, you gain something. You gain this security that you mitigate your risk, I should say. You mitigate your risk, but every choice has consequences. So has drawbacks. So one of the drawbacks is, yes, you're mitigating your risk. However, you lose that wonderfully designed logo. That all those things that the user experience can suffer. And if that's so if you're making a proposal for an e-commerce solution, just be sure to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's like Amazon's bread and butter, right? It's like you just show up,
Never leave it.
buy whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's all one click.
You may also like
Right? Yeah.
these items are often bought together.
Oh, I would love all
One click purchase, please.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Amazon Prime Day is coming up.
Which is my birthday.
Hey!
Someone's getting a shipment from Santazon.
Santazon. Dan spent a lot of time talking about this, the 4 levels. If anyone is actually, look at that animation. Mostly because you couldn't read the level 3. So if anyone here is level 2 or 1, this is me talking. This isn't Greg. This isn't Greg talking, but I will say you really should hire somebody. You can probably hire someone to do this, and you probably aren't listening to this to me talk right now. But yeah, the important thing is, notice that you SAQ recommended, so level 4 and level 3, and the merchant bank is what matters. Yeah. The one thing I don't know, and maybe we can talk about this later, is the if applicable by a quarterly network scan. Who determines whether or not that's applicable? Is that the merchant bank again? Okay.
The merchant bank is going to have the final say. Basically, if you're SAQA, you're probably not going to be required to have. If you're D, you're guaranteed.
Gotcha.
Makes sense.
All right.
But
Interesting.
again, it's wholly on the bank. If merchant bank says nothing, then you do nothing. But more than likely, it's going to be.
If your server's taking in credit cards, your product will get hit.
Yeah.
And like I said, the SAQ is aggressive. It's not something you just sit down and do in a couple of minutes. You're going to spend a couple hours gathering information at minimum. And if you have to produce supporting documentation and stuff like that, it is realistic that it's not just something you're going to just whip out. So you're going to want to steer clear of ending up in D.
Yeah,
If you
seriously.
can.
Huh.
If at all possible, and if the client wants that, hey, that's something that they need to be aware of in the scoping process.
They can probably afford to hire somebody.
Yeah.
Hopefully, unless
Well,
they-
and just to be clear, the level doesn't tell you what SAQ you have to complete. So if you can still have, you could have, I would say 3. Is it 3? You complete the SAQ. Your SAQ that you fill out could still, in theory, be SAQA.
Yeah.
So that could still just take you hours. A few hours.
The only difference is at one, you're no longer doing
You
an
could
SAQ.
sell 10 t-shirts and be
You're doing QSA.
Yeah, you could, and that's if you want to.
Does that come from?
If you want to, you could be SAQD and sell 10 T-shirts.
Not at all.
Sell 1 T-shirt.
And like I said, in the end, it's what throws you in the D bucket is is any cardholder data being injected into your server.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could be level tier 4 SAQD, no problem. Like that,
Yeah.
as long as you accept, because if you're posting credit card information to your server, even if it's just once, okay, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so yeah, not only so the SAQ just determines what bit of paperwork you file. It's sort of like taxes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to pay taxes, just like everyone has to be compliant. It's just a matter of which form you fill out.
Mhm.
If you fill out a 1040 EZ or ES or whatever. But like the important thing is that like compliance begins at transaction 1, and so validation is option, compliance is still mandatory according to the credit card company. And you definitely bump up if there's a breach. So you're liable to fines, and also the next you also bump up a level, and maybe you go to level 1. I can't remember. You bump up at
to the breach.
Yeah.
They have the option to move you to any additional tier, but you're pretty much guaranteed to move at least one up
Mhm.
if you have a breach.
And one of the reasons Dan and I both are using Visa's things is because they're number 1 in North America. So they're kind of the de facto standard, even though there isn't a standard. But if you're number 1, take a look at who has your number 1, whoever has your number 1 transactions. And if you have and if you're level 1 with MasterCard, say they're your number 1, you're level 1 with Visa too. They have that reciprocal relationship. So if you're level 1 somewhere, you're probably level 1 everywhere. Already talked about how shared hosting isn't really a good idea. So antivirus, Dan talked about that also, and definitely HTTPS is recommended. The bottom line is ask your host.
I would say, wouldn't HTTPS be mandatory?
Technically, you can.
Yes, for transaction requests that include cardholder data.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can do a PayPal buy it now button, and then you click that button and you get redirected to PayPal. PayPal's site has HTTPS.
But that button's link will be HTTPS.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the some of the points of when you get into the kind of the nitty gritty, and your slide was actually alluded to that, and I neglected to, is what explodes is the number of things, the number of items that you actually have in your plan.
Mhm.
So you see like a handful for SAQA, and then over 100 for SEQ EP, and then by the time you get to D, you're talking about like 400.
Mhm.
It gets into the thing that those points are things like what kind of SSL you can use,
Oh, wow.
what when you do the encryption stack, what can be supported, what version of TLS you can use. So it does get that granular, and if you're D, you're dealing with all of that.
Yeah. It's just the PCI Compliance white paper recommends HTTPS regardless of your level.
And across the
But
board,
it's technically feasible not to be with
Sure.
SAQ-A.
Sure.
and I strongly recommend just in general these days to, if you're putting up a site, SSL it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
There's no ding anymore. There used to be an SEO ding for it, and it's gonna flip the other way.
Yeah.
Sites that don't use SSL are gonna get dinged within a year.
It's coming. Another thing, so module choices, always an implication when building a Drupal site. And so I found 3 that could probably work. I definitely am a big fan of Drupal Commerce. It's the one I've used the most with Drupal 7. And Drupal 6 was UberCart. And actually, UberCart does still exist. I don't have much experience with it, but you shouldn't basically be building your own e-commerce solution for Drupal. That's really the main reason, because it's not a great idea. These solutions exist for a reason. Shopify e-commerce it's the new kid on the block. And actually, it's a company in Manchester that does it. So
No kidding.
yeah, I invited them to come couldn't
Well,
make it. I
should've.
want them. Yeah, I want them to come at some point. They'll be here, I'm sure, or I'll go to them.
Dude.
Yeah.
Because they could have really done a good demo here. But technically, it's still in beta, but it does work. And each Shopify is basically the only Drupal part is you add it to your cart. Like it integrates with the libraries module. So Shopify, it's a third-party thing. You log on to Shopify.com, you build your store, and then on the Drupal side, all you do is the cart. So you add an item to your cart, and then once you click checkout, you leave your Drupal site and you go to Shopify. You go to your Shopify store. So, and there's an API that talks with the products.
So
So-
it's again, an issue of you losing your branding at
Yep.
shopping cart checkout.
It is they are themes. There are Shopify themes. I did learn enough about that, so you can do some things.
Yeah, Shopify's been
So,
around for
Shopify's been around for a while. So, but this module is new.
Okay.
This
So you
Drupal
keep your
module is new.
site so that it looks like it's contiguous.
It'll look close, I think.
Huh.
I think you can make it look close. You can definitely get your logo in there. And I think it looks better than a PayPal site, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Again,
Huh.
Pretty distinctive.
yeah. So, something to look at, something to consider, especially if a client says, "Oh, maybe we should sell some cups." It's not their mission critical. It's just like e-commerce is just an add-on. Might be a good solution for someone like that. So, in SAQA. So, in order to make SAQA work, make you compliant under SAQA, you have to fully outsource your payment page and the payment processing as well. So, you can have you got to have those two things. And the one I think. So these appear to be PCI compatible under SAQA if you use them correctly. So I just talked about the Shopify module. But again, if you're hacked and you redirect to Shopify or whatever, you cease to become compatible. And Commerce PayPal, but again, only with PayPal Payment Standard. This module lets you use. PayPal has 3 different APIs. But so this is the only one that is, I think. Commerce Braintree, but again, you only, a specific branch with a specific drop-in payment UI. And I'm sorry, I get some overlap there on the slides. But only one of their drop-in payment UI has that iframe. And actually, it's kind of neat. The field itself, the fields are what's iframed, so it's kind of interesting. So I have links to all that stuff to check out, and if there's a specific one you'll want to look at and we have time and interest, we can look at those. So SAQ, AEQ, these are the ones. This is what you're probably, for a robust e-commerce solution, you're probably going to end up under AEQ. So these are the ones that work with that. So Braintree, but with their other APIs work. Authorize.net, but only the SIM, not to be confused with CIM, SIM. So they have very different options, but they have, so only this, there's another Commerce Authorize.net that is not. That would fall under SAQD. Stripe is a good one. Recurly, even though I've never used it, I put that up here just because the documentation was actually pretty good and very clear, so I was able to find it really quick. Part of the problem was tracking down because this DSS 3 just came out in January of this year, and merchants have 6 months to become compliant, and that brings us to July. And again, Commerce PayPal with those other APIs will be SAQA EQ. So, what's up?
So SAQ EP there is
Oh yeah, EP.
so with EP you've packaged the cart.
Basically, you're hosting the
Oh, yeah.
payment page.
SAQ EP.
You can go so far as the card. It's when you get to the point where you're collecting
Okay.
the
So
credit card
Yeah.
So
information.
you got the card.
If that page comes from your server,
Okay.
that's when you're EP.
Okay. So you
Mhm.
you're allowing the user to enter that information on an HTML page on your server, but it's hosting to a payment processor. Okay.
If it hosts to your server, then you're good.
Yeah. and Dan and I did an exercise where we looked at we entered the fake credit card number, and you can pull up your Chrome Inspector and you can see if the credit card number is actually part of that transfer.
Oh, yeah.
You're D.
Yeah.
Right.
You
So
drop right to D.
yeah, you drop right. You skip EP and go directly to.
And that's a
D.
good point with Stripe. They had, like I said, they had that nice plug-in browser-based thing where they're shipping it straight from the browser right off to them. If you name the fields in your form, and you post that form, you're posting all of the named fields out of that form, including the credit card number to your server. So it's important that either do it with Ajax, so you have full control over what's being sent, or make sure there are no names on the form fields.
Right.
Their documentation very clearly calls that out, but it's a really easy way to accidentally end up sending information where and it's the same thing, you don't want your logs, because if you're logging like post parameters and they're not being scrubbed, you can end up logging the credit card number, and you never intended to store it in your system, but guess what, your logs are considered part of your system.
No, it makes sense.
And I have audited systems where they weren't storing the credit card numbers, but they were all through their logs.
Whoops.
Oopsie.
Oh,
Apache. Verbose.
So just another disclaimer, just because you use one of the modules I mentioned doesn't make you PCI compliant. So I thought this was a good recommendation from the Drupal compliant folks. So at the end I'm like, I read this, what is your, and I had to find it. It actually wasn't like in big bold letters or anything, but basically even if you can do SAQA and meet all of those, they recommend go ahead and doing SAQA EP, partly because people can maybe charge you money for that. I don't know. But it kind of makes sense for security reasons and also to future-proof it, because there's a whole cycle. Like there's a development cycle for this, the PCI compliance piece. And so I don't know what year cycle it is. I don't know how long it is, but eventually these will change again. They're constantly evolving based on, as are the people who are trying to get at to breach your commerce solution. So like that guy.
That guy looks bad.
So obviously we don't use these
What is that, sounds
these
luggage
passwords for anything.
That's like the coolest idiot's luggage.
It's amazing. I have the same number. Luggage.
Dragon. I don't know why Dragon is so popular.
Yes, everyone loves dragons.
Game of Thrones? I don't know.
It's because nerds.
So I think this is general.
That's assistant admins right there.
So these are for passwords in general, like in the world. But I found this list actually more interesting of passwords. This is from Greg Rosenberg. So I forget what the percentages mean, but I think this is when he audits sites and he finds bad passwords. Like this is what they are. So he actually finds password 1, which technically is a you got a capital.
Exactly how this comes about, because these are all temporary passwords that nobody changes.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
Twice, though. Password 1's down at the bottom too.
Well, that would be lowercase p.
Yeah.
So technically, it gets used more often. Lowercase p, uppercase p gets used more often. So this person, whoever filled out password 1 with a capital P, knows that it's a little bit more secure.
No, what they did is they
but-
took password and said,
Oh,
you have to have an uppercase letter.
Yeah, true.
That's why
Or they filled out the fields on an Android.
And then auto. Yeah, I hate that.
Why do all my passwords have an uppercase letter?
I hate that.
I actually got a database given to me for a project once, and it had plain text passwords in it. Awful. It was
Wow.
frequent used one though, because we did a group by. Just sure to analyze.
Yeah, why not?
User base. The most frequent one was I love God.
Wow.
Interesting.
You have an interesting demographic.
Was it a religious based organization
No,
or
It
anything?
was actually a government-based thing. But the agency was from Illinois. So that might be a little.
Either way, it's faith-based organizations.
They're praying for something.
So I tried adding these up, and I think it does add up to more than 100%. So I really don't understand what these percents are. But also, I think that the other thing, at some point, I can't remember if it's now or later, but if you are storing credit card data on your server, I think that you have to have anyone who has access to your server has to have two-factor authentication. That came up in this webinar. So, password management is no laughing matter. We just made a huge jokes about it. So
It's hilarious, but it's serious.
yes, it's laughable that someone's using summer. It's like, oh, it's summer right now. I will use that as my password. So other just general stuff, keep Drupal up to date. Don't hack or change any Drupal commerce. Don't invent your own e-commerce solution, and use strong passwords. Are there any other general security? I'm not a security expert, but I knew all this stuff. Other stuff, the firewall.
Yeah, a lot of times it's your stack underneath it, and I'm actually going through this with something else where it has nothing to do with the app that's running on top of it, it's what's running underneath it, and then the exploits that are available for that. So, things like Takria and Pantheon make it really easy to update your Drupal, and they're taking care of your PHP and stuff like that. If you're running it yourself, you may be keeping on top of your Drupal, and there may be a bug in PHP that is actually what people are coming in. So you gotta look at what's that window, what are you exposing to the world, and what's attached to it, and try to minimize it.
And I think
they
that's
tend to do auditing on hosts like Bluehost. Even I've gotten messages from them saying, we found something, we found some security flaw in your site, so you need to do that. And actually, I let it go way too long, and they froze my account at one point.
wow.
So,
I didn't know that.
They did.
Huh.
They took it very
Massive vulnerability.
seriously. I don't even know what it was. I just deleted it because it was a test site, so I just deleted everything. But yeah, no. So the going with a server solution like that has benefits. Yeah. Cool.
Sweet. So if you Google Drupal compliance, you'll get the white paper. And the Drupal Compliance Demystified, I actually had to watch it a few times to get demystified, but it was still pretty mystical after. It was still pretty mystified after the first one.
It was very misty after the first time, and then it started to clear after the third.
The third time was just humid.
Yeah, but it's an hour long, but I've spent a lot of time on it.